Yep. Get over it. Huh? All right, Joan, I got it.
What'd you get?
Remember, I was trying to figure out what I was trying to decide the name that I have for Gavin Newsom, and I wasn't sure that I was allowed to say it on the radio.
Oh, but you got some clarification on that?
I got some clarification. I wanted to call him a tool.
Okay.
Now, I've never really understood what exactly a tool is because I'm not necessarily a name caller. So I asked RJ, okay, what is the definition of a tool? Because I wanted to make sure that I didn't say anything that I'm not supposed to say on the radio. So a tool is...
From the Urban Dictionary of the Internet, a tool is someone who gives up their personality to be with the cool kids or is not smart enough to realize they are being used.
So there you go. Now, I don't know if that's appropriate for Gavin Newsom or not. I'm going to talk to Matthew Hurtt right now and find out. I don't know, Gavin, Matthew, do you think that is an appropriate term for Gavin Newsom, a tool?
Well, Dan, this is Matthew from Standards.
Yes.
And no, I think you're absolutely okay. You don't have to push the dump button this morning. But Gavin Newsom he feels like a used car salesman. I can't imagine a situation where voters outside of California in a hypothetical 2028 presidential election would find Gavin Newsom an attractive candidate outside of his San Francisco good looks.
Do you believe, we're talking earlier about this whole battle going on between he and Joe Rogan. And Rogan is quoted as saying, I would have had him on, but he's being such a jerk that there's no reason for me to have him on if that's going to be the way that he's going to be. If Joe Rogan finally decided to have Newsom on, do you think that would be good or bad for Gavin Newsom?
Yeah, I think Joe Rogan is a fair interviewer.
I do too.
I've listened to thousands of hours of Joe Rogan where he's interviewed Bernie Sanders and conservative leaders and musical guests and comedians. And the guy just wants to have a good conversation. I think if Gavin Newsom is human and not a lizard person like I think he actually is.
He is a total lizard person. Gavin Newsom is a lizard person.
He should be able to have a conversation. And, Gavin Newsom had a conversation with Charlie Kirk on the podcast before Charlie's assassination, and it was fine.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I do think, though, if you think about professional wrestling and other arenas, this is sort of the drama before the big fight. So I think if Gavin Newsom and Joe Rogan sit down for a few hours and talk about policy and culture, I think it would be a genuinely interesting conversation.
Well, one of the things I've noticed because you're right, Newsom, he went through like a 3-week period and then we're going to move on to other things, but Newsom went through like a 3-week period where he was truly trying to look more moderate and bipartisan. I don't know if you remember that. It only lasted 3 weeks, and then he started going on the attack against Donald Trump. It was almost like, and that's when he had Charlie Kirk on his podcast. He had somebody else on there, and I can't remember who it was. But then he started launching the attacks on Donald Trump. He got the stupid little, the Twitter thing, the X posts where he was pretending to be Donald Trump, and he went in the completely opposite direction. So I think he wanted to look moderate for like 3 to 4 weeks, and then he just turned into this, as you say, this lizard person that he's become.
Well, Dan, this is quintessential listening to your consultants. I suspect he had one consultant in Sacramento who said, you know what, you should try being the middle of the road guy. And then they ran a poll in San Francisco and it didn't work out. And about 3 weeks later, he changed his tune. That is 100% the kind of politician that Gavin Newsom is, somebody who would listen to consultants and polling. And it is not a surprise to me that he changed his tune. This guy is a chameleon, which is also a kind of lizard, Dan. He hasn't disproven my point.
There you go.
And I definitely think that, he is gearing up toward a 2028 presidential election, and he's trying to find his lane in the Democratic Party. And all of the candidates are going to run far left, further left than Kamala Harris, and he now has to go figure out what that is. And it's probably an HOV lane in the Pacific Coast Highway where you've got to have 12 humans and a lizard in the car to be able to use it.
In other news, this just came out this morning. Headline, James Comer unleashes on Joe Biden, demands DOJ probe of auto pen use in scathing new report. Of course, you know that they've been looking into this. Comer says Biden's auto pen actions should be considered void and that his doctor should potentially lose his license. So, I mean, clearly the Republicans in House Oversight, they're not going to let this auto pen thing go away. Do you really believe at some point that a lot of those, or maybe all of those actions that Joe Biden did utilizing the auto pen could be considered void?
Dan, you and I talked about this a couple of months ago, and I think in the transition between Joe Biden's presidency and incoming President Donald Trump, it is not even clear that Joe Biden was in the room.
Right.
So Democrats want to talk about the threat to democracy. The true threat to democracy is a dozen quote unquote experts in the Oval Office or in the Eisenhower Executive Office building hitting go on an auto pen on things that Joe Biden didn't even know was happening. And I think one of those is the pardons and commutations that happened at the end, the couple thousand of those. He had no idea any of this was happening. This is not how the American constitutional republic works. We elect a president to make decisions. Now, does he delegate some of those decisions to other authorities in the executive branch? Sure. But it looks like these were, quote unquote, Democrat experts running amok with the auto pen. It's very concerning.
You hear what Steve Bannon said the other day, where he was on with, I think it was the BBC, and I played this yesterday, where he's talking about how they are devising a plan to come up with a third term, allowing Donald Trump to run for a third term despite the 22nd Amendment. And I wasn't really surprised to see that over the last couple of days, President Trump has endorsed now Andy Ogles, of course, 5th Congressional District Congressman. Andy was the first guy when Trump just came into his office for the second term. Andy was out there, and I think he submitted legislation or something that would allow Trump to run for a third term. And so now you've got Steve Bannon saying the same thing. Trump himself is, not really directly addressed it. He has, given people hats that says Trump 2028, almost like kind of like a troll. But I mean, what do you think about this?
I like the troll side of this, but I think George Washington had it right. Last week, Dan, we talked about presidents. I'll come back in a few weeks with more presidential trivia. But George Washington served 2 terms. He returned to Mount Vernon. I think we saw what happened to America under FDR, a 3.5-term president. But the broader question for America First activist supporters and voters is who does come after Donald Trump. You and I have talked about J.D. Vance is carving out that lane for 2028, and you and I have also talked about if another Republican sort of tries to outshine Donald Trump in the news cycle, he or she may get whacked by the president. But I do think there is a philosophy, there's a governing philosophy to America First, as Donald Trump was able to articulate in his first and now his second term, and voters and Americans and supporters of the president should be looking to what comes next, because the success of a movement is when the leader moves on, the sort of instigator of the movement moves on, and what is next, who is left in the space. And I think groups like America First Policy Institute and others are building out a sustainable America First policy scope or space that will allow those leaders to rise to the occasion.
Do you think, and I have spoken, whether it's nationally on Red Eye Radio or here in Nashville, where there's a lot of people who are diehard Trump supporters that are like, no. 2 terms is enough. We got J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio and Ron DeSantis and others, I'm sure, that are just waiting for their opportunity. Just from what we know about the Republican Party, do you think more Trump supporters are for or against this idea? Do you have any thought on that? I think that the majority of them are like, no, we want to see what's going to happen next. We're pumped about J.D. Vance.
Well, I think there are plenty of opportunities out there. You have to square, am I willing to support my preferred presidential candidate over historic precedent and constitutional limitations? And I do think there are more exciting, I do personally think J.D. Vance is an exciting figure. He's a young guy. He's just a couple of years older than me, serving as vice president. And so there is longevity in this movement, and people who can take the torch from President President Trump at the end of a second term. I think it'll be a successful second term, and keep going on with a comprehensive governing philosophy that puts America first, that puts the American worker first, that prioritizes families, that secures the borders, and that keeps our streets safe. And I think that is what many people who support the president are looking for, is long-term viability of this political ideology.
I think Hakeem Jeffries is also a lizard person.
He's not America first for sure. He looks great in a sombrero.
People on the super text line, Matthew, are chiming in as to who they believe in the political world are lizard people. I've always thought that Nancy Pelosi is either like a lizard person or somebody from out of this world, if you know what I mean. So, and people are having fun with that. The president, one of the things that I thought was interesting is, and I've been covering this, he's asking for, or his people are asking for, his lawyers, $230 million, a reimbursement from the FBI for all of the lawsuits and the legal issues that he had over the 4 years that Joe Biden was in office, and also during the Russian collusion and all of that kind of stuff. There's no doubt that President Trump was the victim of just, I would say, a corrupt legal system in Washington, D.C. And so he is now asking for $230 million for reimbursement. And the president says, well, the lawyers are handling that or whatever it is. But I don't know. What do you think about that? I think it's really interesting, because I would say that I believe that he deserves the money, in the sense that this is a man, Donald Trump, who was perpetually the victim of what I would say rampant politicized legal system in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, President Trump was the target of an unprecedented witch hunt over years and years and years. We see some of it with the Steele dossier. It is very clear the Biden administration used the levers of government to target the president and his allies. And it is common. It is common when a consumer is wronged in the marketplace that consumer is made whole. Normally, if you buy a faulty product and you're injured, you're made whole through the court system. The big question mark is, how does that work when the government wrongs you? We see frequently at the local level, people who are wronged by local police departments and other government agencies seek damages. So President Trump is seeking damages. I think it is a much more complicated question at the federal level, particularly with the FBI and federal law enforcement. But the premise is the same. When someone is wronged, either in the marketplace or by the government, there are mechanisms to make that person whole, generally with financial compensation, and I think it is a reasonable question to ask.
Well, yeah, and there's, in the world of law, sometimes the loser pays the winner's legal fees. I mean, that is very common in the world of lawyering and law and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's going to be interesting, because, here he is, the president of the United States, and he would essentially be suing at this point his own FBI, but really he's going after Joe Biden's FBI and the FBI of the past. Last question that I have, Matthew, is in California, it does look like they had the redistricting efforts. They had to have it on a referendum. And it looks like that referendum is actually going to pass, and the people of California will approve the referendum that would allow redistricting in the state of California, obviously in time for the midterm elections. Have you and your folks, have you done all of the math and see, with all of the redistricting, with Texas at play, and I think Missouri and, of course, California, if everybody gets their redistricting done, which side is going to end up with more seats in the House of Representatives?
It's a great question, Dan, and California is putting it to the voters. In Virginia, the Democrats put redistricting to the voters a number of years ago, enshrined it in the Constitution, and yesterday opened a special session to radically redraw the congressional lines. It is in violation of Virginia's Constitution, but they are trying to run roughshod. I think, look, if Californians who vote at the ballot box want to redraw their lines, that is a question for California. But the difference this week is that 51 elected Democrats in the Commonwealth of Virginia are deciding to subvert the vote of millions of Virginians to establish a nonpartisan redistricting commission a couple of years ago. And I think it is bad for Virginia, but also if you zoom out into the midterm elections, it's bad for those numbers for Republicans in the House. I think we've got great Republicans at the state level in Virginia who are doing the hard work, and that is why next week, 7 days from now, if the Attorney General Jason Miyares, the Republican, isn't reelected, we're going to have some problems in Virginia because he would be the one to sue the state to protect the district lines as they were drawn by the nonpartisan commission.
Wow.
So California can do what they want, and I think it's okay for them to make that vote. But what is happening in Virginia is a subversion of democracy, plain and simple, and it is really concerning to me.
By the Democrats.
By the Democrats.
All right. And they're the ones that are always calling us a threat to democracy, just to be clear. Let's see here. Shut down, 13 votes by the Republicans, and Democrats have voted no every time to reopen the government. Who do you think is going to get the blame? 30 seconds.
You know, so unions are now coming out in favor of a clean CR. So far left funding mechanism is now supporting the Republican clean CR, the same CR that Democrats supported a year ago. And I think the tide is turning. It'll be slow. It'll hurt the economy in Northern Virginia more than it will hurt any other place in the country. But it looks like cooler heads are going to prevail, and Republicans may eke this out.
All right. Matthew Hurtt, how can people find you on X?
You can find all my Lizard People tweets on X at Matthew Hurtt, MattheWHurtt.
All right. We'll talk to you next time, and always great analysis. And want to welcome on into the program Jeff Smith, foreign policy expert with the Heritage Foundation. And you are also director of the Asian Studies Center there at Heritage. And Jeff, appreciate you joining us on Nashville's Morning News.
Really happy to be here. Thank you.
So let's talk about Donald Trump and his trip to Asia. Now, first of all, he was in Japan yesterday, coming away from it with some trade agreements. And one of the things that I believe that President Trump is always trying to do is neutralize China as best as he can. Talk about, and then we'll get into some specifics, but talk about what is Donald Trump's main goal as he continues this trip in Asia?
Yeah, well, we think and we hope neutralizing China is a big part of it. You know, we're definitely consider ourselves China hawks in the Asian Studies Center at the Heritage Foundation. So we were encouraged to see a few things early on. One was the deal for rare earths that he made in Malaysia, and that's an important, an increasingly important sort of front against China because earlier this year, they announced that they were, in fact, just last month, they announced that they were going to implement a new export control regime around rare earth minerals. And, you know, essentially the Chinese have a stranglehold over this, like, key supply that goes into a variety of different mechanical products from cars to cell phones. And China spent several decades sort of becoming the key choke point supplier of rare earth processed material, and they're starting to wield that weapon against the United States. So we can talk about that more in a bit, but one of the agreements that President Trump struck in Asia was an agreement to begin helping to diversify sources of these rare earth minerals and magnets. The second thing he did was travel to Japan, which many of us consider to be America's top ally in Asia, a treaty ally, a place where we have, you know, multiple military bases and tens of thousands of soldiers. Japan just elected a new prime minister who is very much a strong conservative, likely very ideologically aligned with President Trump. She's a disciple of a famous Japanese Prime Minister, Shinzo Abe, who also got along with President Trump. So I think a big part of the reason to stop there was to get some face time with the new Prime Minister and hopefully, you know, sign a few trade agreements and get that relationship off on the right foot very early.
One of the things that the president has come up with is that there's a big deal with Toyota. They're going to start, I guess, manufacturing cars here, investing in our economy. And of course, the big news is the mineral deal. The president has also, by the way, come up with a mineral deal and working with a mineral deal with Australia and, of course, Ukraine. One of the things I thought was interesting is that he's trying to set up a meeting with Kim Jong-un of North Korea. Do you think that's going to happen?
I'm a little skeptical just because of how much, well, first of all, because of how non-transparent the North Korean regime is, but also, excuse me, the amount of prep work that usually goes into a leader-level meeting like that. I mean, it's normally weeks of preparation. Now, Donald Trump is the kind of sort of unconventional diplomacy embracer that will take a meeting on 24 hours notice or 48 hours notice. He's not afraid to do it. In fact, he'd do it in a heartbeat. I don't know that the North Korean side is necessarily as quick to pull the trigger on a meeting like that. But I think just talking, maybe it does happen, and if it does, I think it would be mostly an opportunity to lay the groundwork for a bigger and more substantive meeting maybe later this year or next year. Look, I think it's a long shot, but the truth is no other president has had any great success with North Korea. You know, everyone talks a tough game, and they just keep marching toward greater and greater missile and nuclear capabilities. So I kind of support the idea we should at least give diplomacy a try.
So with the North Korea, let me ask you this. What would be the purpose of meeting with North Korea?
Well, ideally, I think the main thrust, the main goal of U.S. policy toward North Korea for the past few decades is to try to get them to denuclearize, to try to get them to dismantle their nuclear weapons program. Yeah. And ideally to maybe start slowing down their long-range missile program, which, you know, they're increasingly developing weapons that can touch the United States. Now, we do have missile defense systems, but, you know, it's just kind of to ratchet back tensions to the degree we can and maybe put some safeguards on their nuclear program so they're not just building this massive arsenal or proliferating it, which is another concern of ours. You know, they might be sharing nuclear technology with other countries. So, you know, maybe through diplomacy we could get to a better place, de-escalate some tensions with South Korea. It's a long shot, but it's not impossible.
All right, so let's focus on China, because what I've been saying is, you know, really Japan and some of these other places that he's stopping to, really the main thing here is China. So President Trump and Xi Jinping, they're supposed to meet on Thursday. Donald Trump going in, he was threatening a 100% tariff on China. Scott Bessent is now saying that they've had some negotiations. That deal is now off the table. But one of the things that Scott Bessent said is that when Donald Trump does that, really what he's doing is he is setting the bar for what these negotiations are going to be like. So President Trump says, all right, you know what? 100% tariff on China. And then Bessent has to go in there, and he is able to, he's got some leverage against China as they work on a bigger deal. So what do you think is going to happen? Do you have any predictions with this big meeting with President Trump and Xi Jinping? And has that deal already been struck, and now it's just time to, you know, time for the two leaders to meet face to face?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I have some concerns about where China policy has been headed over the past few months and really what China has been doing over the past few months. I do think it's likely we're going to get some kind of deal this week. And, you know, Bessent and Greer and the trade negotiators said that, you know, in talks the last few days, they essentially came up with a framework that they were going to present to the two leaders to sign. I think that it is likely they sign some framework that will, at a minimum, bring us back from the brink. There's these sort of, each country had a loaded gun pointed at the other one. The Chinese have said they're going to implement this rare earth export control regime. They announced that last month, and this is really a big deal. And again, we can talk about that more, but essentially they were going to say any raw materials you need that are processed with any Chinese rare earth minerals, is going to require a license from us. And that would essentially give the Chinese Communist Party the opportunity to turn on and off the U.S. economy at will. And so President Trump heard that and said, okay, if you're going to go through with that, then you're going to get 100% tariffs. And that was the leverage, I think, that Bess and others needed. Now, the early rumors are that the Chinese have agreed to delay the regime. They're not going to withdraw it. They're not going to cancel it. They're going to delay it. And, you know, that's problematic because I don't want that gun pointed at my head in a year from now either. But that's better than next month. So I think what really this is about is buying the two sides more time to work through their differences before using these like nuclear options that frankly could really harm each other's economy.
I think one of the frustrating things for me is, you know, and I'm a talk show host in Nashville, so what do I know? But, you know, part of my frustration with Joe Biden was, you know, when he said, oh, China, these are not, you know, bad folks, and it really didn't take China seriously. Donald Trump for years has been taking China incredibly seriously. Is there a concern on your part that, you know, we come to an agreement with China and then we go back to this sort of level of complacency where we continue to depend on China? I would like to see us break free from China as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. No, really, and, you know, it's in some ways our fault because we should have learned this lesson after COVID.
Yep.
I mean, COVID, which, you know, I feel very comfortable saying came out of a lab in Wuhan and was a lab leak, and I've got mountains of evidence for anyone that's skeptical of that. That should have been the wake-up call that when we figured out that all our, like, major and critical pharmaceutical supply chains ran through communist China. And we sort of did an inventory and realized, wow, this era of globalization, lots of stuff in our economy is dependent on China. And that's when we should have started moving quickly to decouple. But if anyone needed an additional reminder of the importance of that, I think these rare earth exports, that's the thing that's really concerning to me, is that China is acting differently now. You know, they acted very belligerent toward their neighbors, have been doing that for over a decade now. They sort of lifted the veil, but they've still, even as they sort of twisted the knife against the U.S. in a lot of ways, diplomatically they pretended to play nice. And now we're at a point where the Chinese are just openly being aggressive against the United States because they think their time has arrived.
Yeah.
And we really need to move quickly to decouple, or I fear we're going to find ourselves in an even worse situation. I do think Donald Trump gets that. I think he's in a somewhat tricky situation in that he knows there are still some key vulnerabilities that, you know, it might take us a couple years to unwind before we have full autonomy and independence from China. And so there may be a little bit of a rocky road ahead in the short term.
I got to ask, Jeff, you can't see me. I am laughing because there's a muffler or something. Is that your car?
No, someone just passed me. It wasn't my car. But someone's muffler needs to get fixed.
My Lord, I'm laughing because as you're answering, the muffler is in the back. I can still hear what you're saying. It's just, you know, I was wondering if that was your car. Anyway, whatever. So last question here, and great analysis. Do you think there is an opportunity? Like, do you think we'll ever be able to fully uncouple with China because of let's talk about the ingredients in medicine that we get from China. We get a lot from China. Is there actually a practical way for us to uncouple from China, you know, to the extent that we really need to?
I think so. Yeah, I think, look, it's going to be a little bit painful and a little bit costly, but when we put our mind to something as a country, we can do it. You know, in World War II, we built 150 aircraft carriers in the middle of the war, right? I mean, now it takes us 10 years to build one. They're obviously more advanced, but look, the Chinese are doing it. They set their own goal many years ago to decouple from us. And they've been working toward that goal for the past decade. And now they're almost self-sufficient from the United States, which gives them significant leverage. So if they can do it, I'm pretty sure we can do it too.
Love it. Jeff Smith, how can people follow you on X? Are you on X?
I am on X. I don't tweet as much these days, but I'm on there. It's my tag name is Cold Peace.
All right, very good. And I'll go ahead and give you a follow. And Jeff, thank you very much for joining us. Jeff Smith with the Heritage Foundation. 7:50 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 at WTN. Joan, did you hear that muffler?
I did. It was pretty
so
loud.
it wasn't like.
No, it wasn't just you.
Okay, I can be a little ADD or whatever sometimes. I'm like focused on the muffler, and I'm like, that can't just be me. Do you know what I heard on social media, Joan?
What's that?
There was some dude who was spouting off about how if people came to his door dressed any kind of MAGA way, it's going to give the kids candy laced with fentanyl.
Oh.
Now, obviously, the guy's BSing, but can you imagine who? This is how insane these people are.
That's if they know who it is it somebody local? Are you talking local?
No, it was just online. It's just it's this. It's like one of these social media contagions.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think it'd be great to go dressed as Donald Trump. I do. I think it'd be fun. I mean, I'm not dressing up for how is it okay for parents to dress up as Halloween?
No.
No?
I hate seeing parents out with parents out dressed in their costumes with
All
their
right, so
kids.
you missed it, Joan. Last night.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly Riker's going with, but he's got this long wig.
Oh.
So
he's Melania.
No, he's not Melania. But I, of course, couldn't help myself. But I put on the wig.
Yeah.
So it was like, reliving my late teen, early 20 years where I had hair down to my back.
Are there pictures?
No, I did start playing like air guitar and doing the whole, thing.
Yeah.
Amy told me to take it off. She did not find it humorous in any way, shape, or form.
I'm sorry, Dan.
You know what she said? Don't break the wig. Don't mess up the wig. Okay, fine, honey. And I put the wig down. She said, this is why we can't have nice things in the house.
That's right.
All right.